Shabbat Shalom. It's Shabbat Hagadol. I hear that means the rabbi is supposed to give a very, very long dvar. Luckily for you, I'm not a rabbi yet. This will be normal. We have 2 months to go. We are in this very long slew of parshiot about Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and what he was to be getting up to in the Mishkan. And in this parsha, we finally transition from all of this talk about what it's going to be like to it actually happening. He's officially ordained as the high priest, along with all of his sons, and his potential begins turning into action. There's a lot of rigmarole to it. There's the dress, and there's the consecrating and the oil, and the entire community is there. The entire community is assembled by the instructions of God. But then what they lift up is just these couple of people. And we know that the construction of the Mishkan and the actions of the priests within it were the blueprint for how we worship today, for so much of what we're literally doing here today. Which leads me to the question of why was it this way? You know, today it makes sense. We're basing what we did off of the temple, which was basing it off the Mishkan. But why was the Mishkan constructed the way it was? And why were all of these sacrifices and prayers? Why this way? It could have been anything, right? Like it could have been, why does Aaron get to be the one at the top who does all the things? Why not like we all do stuff, or we all get to do the sacrifices, or we can atone on our own behalf? You know, like there's so many different ways this could have been organized. And why does this guy get to be the one that does all of it? And if I'm starting to sound strangely like Korach, our rebel from a few parshiot from now, don't worry, I'm not here to start a coup. I'm asking curious questions, and I have also some responses, not from me, but from the Sfat Emet. The Sfat Emet, 19th century Polish Hasidic Rebbe, addresses this question of why God chose to have Aaron represent us in this way. What was the meaning of this? And he says that after the sin of the golden calf, God understood that Bnei Israel, that people, were a mix of good and evil. I don't know why he didn't figure that one out before that, actually, but if it wasn't clear before, it was very clear then. We're not all good. We get mixed up. We're all mixed up. There's all sorts of stuff going on here. But God still wanted there to be a way that God could relate to us just in our goodness. And so God lifts up Aaron as this kind of symbol of tahara, of purity, and interacts with Aaron from that place of purity. And it says, "Va'al yedei zeh yimshach mikocho tahara leklal Yisrael." By way of this, that the purity flows down to all of Israel. So by God interacting just with Aaron, just from this place of goodness, that has this positive benefit on the rest of us. Kind of makes sense. Like it kind of says, yeah, there's like something there. But the Sfat Emet continues in a way that I think elucidates even further and helps us understand even further what this means and how this might make sense. The Sfat Emet employs a Kabbalistic concept called Olam Katan. Olam Katan basically means microcosm. Olam, world, Katan, small, world or universe. And the idea is that what's happening on the level of the world, what's happening on the level of Bnei Israel, is like a blueprint for what's happening inside of us. That the same thing, those same processes are working inside of us in some way. So in the same way that Aaron was lifted up from all of the people and represented purity in this way and was able to flow down purity to the rest of Bnei Israel by being able to just be representing that process also is recognizable internally for us too, that there's some way that this happens within us. And so what this means is that if we're struggling to understand exactly what does this mean, we can look internally and say, okay, well, I see it here, so now it makes a little bit more sense. And so here's what the Sfat Emet says. He says, you can do the same thing that God did. In the same way that God lifted up Aaron, you can set aside one quality or one mitzvah, one midah, one kind of positive character trait, or one mitzvah, one mitzvah, about which you take fabulous care. You can do it exceptionally well. ועל ידי זה יכול למשוך הערה ותיקון לכל המידות. And by way of this, can flow down light and tikkun and redemption to all of your different qualities, to your whole self. So I want to invite you to think, to reflect on a second. Do you already have a favorite mitzvah or a favorite quality? Is there something that just without having learned this particular teaching, there's some midah, some positive character trait like patience, humility, generosity? Is there something that you try to pay attention to a little bit more than some of the other ones? Or a mitzvah, is there some mitzvah that you pay particular attention to? Lighting candles, visiting the sick, saying Modeh Ani when you wake up in the morning, giving thanks. And if there isn't something that just kind of comes to mind as, yes, I'm already doing this, I invite you to just imagine something. Maybe even to be like, I'm going to try this out for the next week or month or something like that. What would it be like to raise this up and to let it be special? And this is remarkable in a way, coming from this Rebbe, because you might have expected him to say, no, you do everything really well. Like, you should be doing all the mitzvahs, obviously, right? And it's not that he's saying don't do all the mitzvahs, but there's a recognition that we're a mix of good and evil, right? There's a recognition that we're not perfect and we're all mixed up. And so by bringing out one particular thing, you can just imagine for yourself, like, what would it be like to really just be like, I'm going to do this one so well? Is it not the case that would just lift up your entire practice of doing mitzvot, or your entire practice of trying to act as a better person in the world? It kind of just, to me, it just like, it lands. It just makes more sense here. And I've been thinking about, well, what is it that happens? Is it just that? Is it only here the case that you just do a little bit more good, and so that's how the good flows, right? Because if you're paying more attention to being patient, so then you're a little more patient, and then you're a slightly better person, and then that brings, I think there's more of it than that. It's a little bit more than just that. There certainly is this cultivation through action, this actual increase in good, but I think there's also this added benefit of the particular paying attention to that goodness. Instead of just going about what we're doing, to pay particular attention to one good thing that we do, what that does is it allows us to pay attention to the good that we're doing. And this is important because if we don't do this on purpose, we probably aren't going to do it. We humans are subject to what behavioral economics calls the negativity bias. The negativity bias is basically if there's something that's like good and something that's equally bad, they're the same amount. So in a totally rational sense, you should pay the same amount of attention to the good thing as to the bad thing, because they're like equal to each other. We pay more attention to the bad. And not only do we pay more attention to the bad, but we overestimate how bad the bad is. Which means that we're walking around in our lives thinking that things are worse than they are. Basically, all the time. Which makes a certain amount of sense, actually makes a lot of sense, kind of from an evolutionary perspective, which is if you're walking through the jungle, it is much preferable that you not notice the pretty flowers than that you not notice the tiger that's there to eat you. Right? I would choose that, again, that's a good way that we're oriented, but there's a pretty big cost, which is that we miss the flowers, and we miss the goodness, and we miss our goodness, because we end up paying so much attention unless we pay attention more on purpose. And our tradition, so much, I think, of our tradition is about trying to get us to pay more attention to the good, which, again, we don't usually notice because we usually notice the parts of our tradition that are trying to get us to pay attention to the bad. But so much of Jewish practice, starting in the Mishkan, is about getting us to notice the good. One of the types of sacrifices that this Torah portion tells us to be sacrificing is the Zevach HaTodah, is the thanksgiving offering, that we are particularly meant to say thanks. And that has huge kind of holdovers into our prayer service that we have today. So much of what we're doing here is just saying thank you, thank you, thank you, and noticing the good and noticing the good. Before we eat, we say a blessing. It's not just stam. It's like if you were just eating, if you were going to eat, probably what's happening inside of you is, I'm hungry, as in I'm dissatisfied, as in something is wrong here. And the mitzvah that we are commanded to pray before we eat, to give thanks before we eat, is stopping that in its tracks. That eating becomes not something like, oh no, I'm hungry, that means that something's wrong. But rather, what a gift that there's food. What a gift that I get to eat something right now. It's a totally different orientation that we usually don't even, I think, reflect on at all. In fact, even a lot of the times when we're saying blessings, we still don't reflect on this. But I think that this is what it is meant to orient us towards. I just want to, as we are in Shabbat Hagadol and coming up to Pesach, just orient us to some of the ways that the Pesach Seder really does this also, this really intentionally orienting us again and again towards also what is good. Pesach certainly is reminding us of a lot of things that are not so good and bringing us right into the visceral experience of being slaves and right into all the things that are the kind of fullness of this story. But the kind of main thing that we are to do, b'chol dor v'dor chayav adam le'irot et atzmo ke'ilu hu yatzah miMitzrayim, in every generation a person is supposed to see himself as if he left Egypt, not as if he was a slave in Egypt. Right? As if he left Egypt. Like the leaving part is the part that we ultimately are supposed to focus on in Pesach. I've also been thinking about Dayenu, the prayer, like Ilu hotzianu miMitzrayim Dayenu. If we'd only been taken out of Egypt, Dayenu. And when you actually read it, you're like, no. Like it would not have been enough. Like if you had just left us at the sea with nowhere to go, with the Egyptians on one side and the sea on another, Dayenu. And it's like when you read it, you're like, it would not have been Dayenu. Like literally, it's untrue in like a literal sense. But I think that what it's doing is pointing us towards each step of the way, even though there was uncertainty, even though there was fear, even though there was so much that we didn't know, each step of the way was a gift. And there were gifts to be found in each single step of the way. Every single place had goodness to notice also. So this whole ritual universe that is Judaism is inviting us to notice the good all of the time in the midst of every other thing. And one tiny way to manifest that is in our own little experience, in this small spiritual practice of paying particular attention to doing one good thing very well. Wishing you a Pesach of knowing and attending to each of the blessings in our collective stories and in our lives. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Sameach.